Hi YouTube. So this is one of many videos I'm going to upload post our convention. This one, you've probably seen the latter half or parts of it. The interview, I was actually in the right place at the right time and caught the whole thing. It's the whole interview. The very beginning, the only dialogue you're missing is where the Muslim guys approach PZ and said to him very abruptly, Professor Mars, why do you hate Muslims? To which he retorted, I don't hate Muslims. And I think I started recording from then. So there we are, enjoy.
I think we have a lot of good reasons to believe the intellectual foundation sounds very, very strong.
No, they don't.
Okay, why? Why then not?
It relies on this profit.
Okay, what's wrong with our prophet?
How does he know?
Did he even exist? Okay, let me give you some evidence.
I read this book last night.
How do you find it?
Terrible.
Okay.
This is disgraceful.
Give me some
You
contentions.
clearly have some money here because you can put up these nicely printed booklets. But this,
We have money. You have a very nice suit on.
well, yeah. So what I'm saying is you've got some money. You're investing money in this, and then you've got this crap. This is rehashed creationist nonsense. This is the same stuff we've been dealing with in the United States for the last 50 years.
Okay.
And there's absolutely nothing in here that's original.
Okay.
And all of it's been frequently refuted. So,
But what we just made are statements and generalizations. You haven't given any substance here. What do you mean? I mean, do you disagree that, for example, when we talk
for
about...
instance, well, you make the first cause argument.
No, we don't actually. It's actually called the Kalam cosmological argument. It's a rehashed version, it's a modern version that has good premises and if you study logic...
No, there's...
Okay,
come on, no,
okay. Let me give it to you very in summary, right?
Okay, give me the summary.
There's two premises here. Whatever begins to exist is a cause. The second premise is the universe began to exist. Okay, and we could substantiate that philosophically and using astrophysics. Then the conclusion, which makes it a sound and valid argument, is that then the universe has a cause. So if the universe began to exist, it has a cause. So let me just repeat that.
Okay.
One, whatever begins to exist is a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. It doesn't mean it's God though. But we use conceptual analysis
that's why I'll point out two things
okay,
there.
good.
And one is that modern physics does not support your claims.
Okay.
You can have spontaneous things just popping into existence. They do all the time.
Okay, can I address that?
And,
is that
well,
right?
first, and let me make my other point, which is that, as you mentioned, pointing out that there was a cause does not imply a God.
I agree.
So why do we care?
You didn't let me finish.
Okay, now you're going to finish.
Okay, good. So first thing, in terms of random quantum fluctuations and subatomic events that don't correspond to causality, well, that's a particular view amongst physicists, which is an indeterministic view. We don't have to hold that view. You know, the mathematics is there, but there could be different translations in the real world. So for instance, you could take a deterministic view, which is the David Bowie interpretation, for instance, right? And there's other physicists who are taking that view. So you can't just say it's all of physics. And I think that's a bit of a scientific outdated cliche.
But then what you're doing is you're admitting that you're basically cherry picking the...
No, we're not, because...
Well, yes, you are. You just said that.
No. Let me tell you why. Because if you take a Kantian argument that causality is a priori, it's independent from experience. Because we only know that we could order our perceptions in the universe based upon the innate concept of causality. So to accept that there's no causality in the quantum fluctuations would be denying your own very perceptions in the first place. So we have good reasons to believe that there's causality here, and quantum fluctuations don't say much. The other point I'm trying to make is when we know there's a cause for the universe, which you're happily assuming that there may be a cause, the problem is that now when you use conceptual analysis, you come to some starting conclusions. For example, we would argue that Occam's razor must be uncaused. We would argue that therefore it must be eternal. We would argue that it's immaterial and transcendent because it created the material world. So from these perspectives, it's in line with the monotheistic view of God. I don't see that as a problem.
I see that as a huge problem.
Why?
Because what you've got is an anthropomorphic patriarchal God.
No, we haven't said anything about anthropomorphism.
Yes, you have.
That's a Christian narrative.
This is the Islamic narrative too.
No, in the Quran,
you're all-
Quran it says
you're all
"Laysa
built-
kamithli shay," which means God is transcendent. There is nothing like unto Him. And when we say Him, is no gender.
So what?
But do you see how some of your outdated cliches,
You've
you
got-
can't apply them to the
You've
Quran?
got a personal God who takes a personal interest in human beings.
Okay, what's wrong with that?
You have no evidence for this.
We do. Can I give you evidence for God having a will? Okay, an
no.
eternal being, bringing to existence a finite effect, must have chosen it to come to existence. Choice indicates a will, and a will indicates it can have a relationship with personal beings, you see.
Where's the evidence?
Yeah.
Conceptually, so conceptual.
Oh, conceptual.
Okay,
But,
okay.
but do you see?
Okay, you know why that's
I
not
think
funny?
everybody here can see what you're
Is
doing.
it doctor or professor?
Everybody here can see what
Professor
you're doing.
Myers, you know why that's funny? Because you're assuming that you must have an empirical paradigm to everything that you say, verificationism. It's like logical positivism of the 1960s. It doesn't work anymore. I'll give you an example, because empiricism can't even prove logical truths like numbers. Numbers are conceptual.
So?
They're necessary truths.
Science is
so we
not
can't
about
laugh
proof.
that there's no physical evidence for numbers. Do you see the point? Do you understand the point here?
I wonder if I can get in a few words.
Yeah, sure,
here.
go for it. Sorry.
We'll see how far I get. I think everybody here can see exactly what you're doing.
Yeah, that's fine.
So what I do is mention something and you immediately interrupt and you give me this
No, I just want
long
to address it. That's what I want to
Let him
address it.
finish.
case proven.
Go for it.
And that you immediately interrupt and you throw out this long series of philosophical battleground, which is completely irrelevant to your premise. I don't care about this philosophy, okay? Philosophy is a useful tool for generating good questions, but then science is what answers them. Science does not meddle in proofs. So when you keep talking about proofs, you're just going right over my head. I don't care. Proofs don't matter. What matters is, do we have empirical evidence for anything that you're talking about? And we do not. And in fact, we have empirical evidence that defies these interpretations that you're throwing at us.
Can I address that?
Why? Sure.
Thank you. First and foremost, don't you think it's an unhealthy way intellectually to always require empirical evidence to form conclusions about things? Because that would go back to logical positivism. It's very crude. Wouldn't you agree?
No, I would not agree.
Okay, why not?
Because you need the empirical evidence in order to confirm your interpretations of the world. That what we do in science is that you make preliminary hypotheses, which of course are conceptual.
Sure.
But then you rely on the fact that you have to generate empirical evidence about the world around you in order to test them. When you talk constantly about this conceptual stuff, this philosophical stuff, what you're doing is charging off without anything to ground your conclusions.
Okay. Because I think there's a hidden assumption here that the only way you should ground conclusions are empirically. And I agree there's a value for empiricism.
No, that's not true.
But I would argue that there's some logical truths, for instance, that are necessary before you even have empiricism. Do you see? This is why when there was the big rationalist debate, the rationalists with the empiricists, mathematics was the battleground, wasn't it? And this is why you have some empiricists are rationalists for mathematics, but when it comes to the world, the empiricists. That's how they reconciled it. There was a philosophical contradiction there. So it's useful we're having this discussion, but I think there is that, crude view of that empiricism is the only way formed to form conclusions about life.
No. This isn't about absolutes. This is not about. Not that I'm saying that there's only one true way to interpret the world.
Sure.
What this is saying that the one reliable method we have requires confirmation from empiricism.
Okay.
You have not demonstrated another reliable method, because there are lots of people who believe in different religious views. They're all sitting there making exactly the same kinds of arguments you do. The Christians make the very same arguments you do.
Yes, they do, of course.
Yes.
Some Christians, not all.
Most
Some
of
Muslims
them.
just have faith or just
Whatever.
blindly believe whatever.
But the point is that you are both using the same methods and you are arriving at completely different conclusions.
Yeah, I agree. Can I tell
So-
you why I agree with you?
Okay, go ahead.
The reason I agree with you is because, see, we've got one aspect of the philosophical justification for the existence of a creator, cause, whatever you call it. Now, from that, then you have the concept of revelation, the concept of text that is claimed to be from the divine. Now, we would humbly argue that, the Quran, which is the book of the Muslims, we would say is a very intrusive text. It's an imposing text, right? But this imposition, we would argue, is positive because, frankly, I think it just makes you think. For example, the Quran says, أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ? Do you not use your brains? يَتَفَكَّرُونَ, for those who reflect, deep reflection. The Arabic word here means to really reflect about the implications of something. But the Quran goes further than this, which is quite weird from a religious book, from a secular perspective. It actually says, if you don't believe it's from the divine or from the supernatural, then challenge it. So what we would argue humbly is that there are no naturalistic explanations for certain statements in the Quran. For instance, some statements in the Quran that they mention geology and concept of isostasy, for instance. Concepts of that the mountains have like root-like structures, which we just found out recently. If you go to the book Earth by Dr. Frank Press, it concludes that. So how could a desert Arab who knew nothing about science and so primitive that, for instance, they used to believe mountains to keep the sky out, would come to such conclusions? We would humbly argue philosophically, we exhaust naturalistic explanation, so it's a signpost to the transcendent. Do you appreciate that?
No, I've read these same interpretations.
Okay.
In particular, the ones I'm really interested in, because I'm a developmental biologist,
Sure.
Keith Moore's nonsense, total bullshit that he talks about.
You disagree with Keith Moore?
Why is that
Oh,
nonsense?
yes.
Why is that nonsense?
I've read those sections of the Quran.
Do you disagree with the
Quran-
stages of embryology? The Quran, you know, the
Yes.
seventh.
Yes,
So you
Let him say why,
yes,
let
the
him say why.
Quran
Right.
is babbling. It's throwing out these very
Sure.
vague, fuzzy descriptions that, you know, of the embryo looking like chewed flesh or whatever.
Oh no,
And-
I'm not
and-
talking about that. I'm talking about
That's what I'm talking about.
No, I'm talking about specific stages of embryology. For example, the bones are formed first. That's what Dr. Keith Moore was talking about.
Yes.
7th week, and then
We have-
the muscles are
Yes, we
formed
have.
in the 8th
We
week.
have a series of very well described, very thoroughly analyzed steps in the development of the embryo.
Right.
And if you go to any embryology text, they will lay them out for you.
Right.
You cannot substitute the Quran for that. When you look at what the Quran says about it, it is vague, it is ambiguous.
Sure.
It's the kind of stuff that a desert nomad might guess about what's going on.
I mean, I would disagree. I mean, we wouldn't be able to guess the formation of the bones in the 7th week
Yes.
straight after. The word
Yes.
is thumma in Arabic, straight after.
Immediately.
And
So
that's-
when we do scratch the surface rather than have a superficial
But
understanding,
again,
I
this
think we'll get it
no,
better,
no,
right?
This is again something where the Quran is basically stealing from Greek embryology.
Galen, yeah.
Well, I'm talking specifically about Aristotle, who
Okay.
made these
Well,
observations.
Aristotle's embryology, if you study it, I mean, I'm sure you've studied it.
Yes.
He believed that fetus is formed by the mixture of menstrual blood and semen.
Correct.
Well, Quran doesn't make any statement like that. And on top of even if we go further to Galen had
No, but-
many stages of embryology, and the Quran doesn't have any of those things.
My
Yeah.
point is that there's very little about embryology in the Quran.
You-
What there is.
Details are not there. You're right. Yeah,
That's
the
right.
details are not
and
there.
what
Yes.
what details are there
Yeah.
are obviously cribbed from Aristotle.
No,
Yes.
not at all.
You can't make that
Not at all.
link. The reason you can't make that link is because
Which particular?
you would have to assume that the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, would have known what was right, taken it, and then threw away what was wrong. I mean, that's a big assumption. You're
it's
claiming
not.
supernatural here.
What I would
Do you
say is that Muhammad was a man of his times, that he was consulting with scholars at the time, that these were ideas that were
Where's
current
the
and
empirical evidence?
But
common.
there's no empirical or historical
Historical
evidence
evidence for that. There isn't.
But it's just an assumption.
But it's
That's faith.
It's a no.
I have
it's-
faith that the Prophet Muhammad borrowed things from scholars.
Yes.
That's faith.
No,
A man of faith, ladies and gentlemen.
that is a reasonable assumption.
No, how could
The,
it be?
the alternative is to assume
But the
that
history is counter to that. The history is counter to that. You see?
you're saying that Muhammad was some kind of ignoramus living in a cave for all of his life?
No, what I'm
Not at
saying
all.
was, even if your assumption was true, it would still be incorrect because the scholars of science at the time had no idea. They had absolutely no idea what was going on with regards to science. They thought that mountains were keeping the sky up. For instance, yeah.
And that's not true either.
Exactly, but this is why.
No, that's not true what you're saying about the scholars of the time.
No, well, in Arabia, definitely that was the case.
No, in fact, there were no scholars in Arabia. In his city, there were only 17 people who could read and write. Forget the sciences and the complicated knowledge of scriptures. There were only 17 people in his entire tribe who could read and write.
I'm just kind of surprised that your argument rests on the fact that you're arguing that Arabs were ignorant nomads who knew nothing at all.
Yes, this is exact. This is what we said. Yes. There were people who were
But so
killing
was
their
many
daughters.
Europeans at that time as
Yes.
well. I mean, there are lots
But
of people.
I think the evidence, the historical evidence, shows that there's much more trade and communication going on than you are giving people credit
Well,
for.
you can be ignorant and do trade. I mean, we have
Yes.
people doing trade today who are ignorant.
And
Look at the bankers today, man. What they've done to us.
And that
They've
trade-
kept all our money.
and with trade comes information. Like I say, when we look at the descriptions of embryology in the Quran, and we look at the descriptions of embryology in Aristotle,
Sure.
they're the same.
Well, in what way, sir? Would you like to give us?
No, I don't think they're the same.
The discussion of the development of bones, etc., all these things, the fairly crude stages that are described in Aristotle, it's obvious.
You